Welcome back, Trailblazers. Before we dive into today's episode, I want to take a moment to talk about a tool that has completely transformed the way I plan and navigate my hikes, AllTrails Plus. As a Trailheads ambassador and the organizer of the Yakima Valley Trekkers, I'm out on the trails a lot. One of my favorite features of AllTrails Plus is the ability to edit and create my own maps. Conditions change, fallen trees, washed out sections, or even a last-minute reroute. And with AllTrails Plus, I can adjust my route on the fly and share it with others so everyone stays informed and safe. AllTrails Plus also gives you offline maps, wrong turn alerts, and 3D trail previews to help you stay on track and make the most of your adventure. And the best part, you can get 30% off an AllTrails Plus membership with my exclusive link in the episode show notes. So whether you're planning your next big trek or just looking for a new trail to explore, AllTrails Plus has you covered. Check it out and let's hit the trail. Welcome to the season 13 of the Hikes and Mikes podcast. I'm your host, Ivan, and each week we're hitting the trail through conversations with extraordinary hikers from across the United States and beyond. Winter brings its own kind of magic to the outdoors. Quiet forests dusted in snow, frosty ridgelines glowing in soft morning light, and trails that ask us to slow down, bundle up, and move with intention. This season, I've had the privilege of sitting down with hikers whose stories reflect the same sense of resilience and wonder. From snow-covered summit pushes and cold weather camping lessons to mindful miles on peaceful winter trails, their voices remind us that adventure doesn't hibernate, it simply changes shape. So zip up your puffy, pour something warm into your mug, and get ready. Season 13 is here, and the conversations ahead are as bold, reflective, and inspiring as the winter landscape we love. In this special Valentine's Day week episode of Hikes and Mikes, we're joined by Melanie and Dave, otherwise known as Poppi and Bamba Went on Trail, a thru-hiking couple whose love story unfolded one step at a time across some of North America's most iconic long trails. From the Pacific Crest Trail to the Colorado Trail, Arizona Trail, and beyond, their relationship has been shaped by shared miles, hard-earned lessons, and a deep love for life on trail. Melanie returns to the podcast alongside Dave, making his first appearance, as they share how they met on the PCT, built a friendship through trail miles, and eventually took a leap of faith that turned into a powerful partnership, both on and off the trail. They reflect on hiking through record snow years, flipping sections, reuniting unexpectedly in Washington, and tagging Canada together in a full-circle moment that still feels surreal. This conversation dives deep into what it's really like to thru-hike as a couple, while navigating independence while hiking together, to supporting each other through injuries and setbacks, including a tough season on the Arizona Trail. Melanie and Dave open up about learning to communicate through stress and exhaustion, and why trust, flexibility, and patience matter just as much as mileage and gear. We also share unforgettable trail moments, including sunrise on Mount Whitney, spotting a rare Gila monster on the Arizona Trail, moose encounters on the Colorado Trail, and the magic of the Wonderland Trail around Mount Rainier. The episode closes with thoughtful advice for couples planning their first backpacking trip together, and reflections on what keeps their shared adventures and their relationships going strong. Without further ado, let's jump into this episode with our guests, Melanie and Dave. Welcome, everyone, to a special Valentine's Day week episode of the Hikes and Mikes podcast. We have a returning guest with us today. Her name is Melanie. You might remember her from our previous season back in August 2025. And she is with Dave, her partner, who's going to be joining us on the podcast for the first time. Melanie, can you catch us up with what you've been up to since we last spoke? And for new listeners, can you give a quick refresher of who you are and where you're based out of?
Yeah. Hi, Ivan. Thank you so much for having me back. It's an absolute pleasure. But I currently live in Oregon. I moved here about 8 years ago for grad school and honestly didn't know if I was going to like the Pacific Northwest and instantly just fell in love with the outdoor culture here. But yeah, I'm pretty much spend a ton of my time through hiking, backpacking, trail running, anything outdoors. And when I'm not doing that, I love to cook and bake or just, focus on anything wellness, nutrition, mindset work. But since we last spoke, it was kind of wrapping up the end of summer. So I snuck in a few final backpacking trips in Goat Rocks, Three Sisters, took a trip to Hawaii and actually got to experience some ridge hikes out there, which are absolutely beautiful and kind of a new obsession and just completely different. And otherwise, then this time of year, kind of moving into winter, I focus more on trail running and actually following like my strength training split and whatnot. So it's a little bit of a slower season, but I feel like that's the nice thing of just being able to transition into different phases throughout the year. So yeah, still getting outside a ton, but just in a different way.
And I got to ask, Melanie, because I'm pretty sure I remember you posting about your Goat Rocks trip. You got some really good weather, but you also got to catch like the start of the wildcat fire further up north, right?
Yeah. So that was actually wild. When I was like my first day hiking out, I could see it in the distance. So while I was hiking along like Knife's Edge and whatnot, it was absolutely wild because you could just see the plume in the distance, but there was really no visual smoke. And then that night, it was really cool because where I was camping, obviously it's pitch black dark and I could just see the fire in the distance. And then winds shifted that night and woke up to just complete smoke everywhere, which was kind of that weird, eerie, cool vibe where it definitely adds to the landscape, but you're also like, this is all smoke. Glad I was out there during it before it got too smoky. But yeah, it was also still beautiful when it was smoky.
Yeah, great captures, by the way. I think you were able to share some nighttime captures of the fire kind of glowing in the distance.
Yeah, which was wild. I don't know if I've ever seen that.
Yeah, and the first day, it looked like you had a really wonderful, at least weather-wise, day up in the Goat Rocks.
Yeah, it was like an absolute dream the first day and just very fun being back because I hadn't been back since the PCT.
And Dave, this is your first time on the Hikes and Mikes podcast. For listeners meeting you for the first time, can you share a little bit about yourself and how you got started hiking?
Yeah, sure. Absolutely. Thanks for having us on, Ivan. Excited to be here. Hello, everyone, and happy Valentine's Day. My name is Dave. If you've met me out on any long trails, you probably know me as La Bamba. So I am born and raised in northern Kentucky, the greater Cincinnati area, at the very top part of Kentucky. I still live there when I'm not out adventuring with this one here. Northern Kentucky is my permanent home. Let's see. I spent most of my career in the restaurant industry back in Northern Kentucky, managing and running our family's restaurants in the greater Cincinnati area. So that's what I spent the last almost 20 years doing. And as far as my venture into the outdoors, that all started around 2018, where I had really kind of worked myself into a burnout mode, as many people that work in restaurants understand. It's nights, weekends, holidays, consistent overtime can be pretty rough mentally and physically. And I just worked myself into a point where I was feeling called to do something exciting and go for an adventure, which is when I, seemingly with not much experience in the backpacking world, decided I was going to hike the Appalachian Trail in 2019. So I did that, fell in love with the thru-hiking lifestyle so much, just absolutely everything about it. Absolutely loved it, fell in love. However, afterwards went back to work in the restaurant for a few more years. Never really thought I would get back out and do another thru hike until 2023. I made the decision to leave the restaurant industry for good and do the PCT. And since then, I haven't really looked back and just loved it so much. I decided I'm going to try and do as many trails as I can. Since then, as you've probably seen, I'm 2/3 of the way through my Triple Crown. Since then, with Melanie, I've done the Colorado Trail, the Arizona Trail. I've done half of the Sheltowee Trace. We did the Wonderland recently. As far as, what led me to that decision to take off on the Appalachian Trail, it's actually kind of a funny story. Back in 2018, my original intention was to never go off on a grand adventure. Funny enough, I was online looking for reviews for a tent that I was going to buy. At the time, I had gotten to a point where, innocently enough, all I really wanted to do was just kind of make a concerted effort to get back out in nature, into the outdoors. Growing up, I wasn't, I wouldn't consider myself extremely an outdoorsy person. Spent time in the outdoors, but nothing like I've done now. So I kind of wanted to give get into the car camping thing. And, something about me, I'm quite a gear nerd. So I started with something simple with looking for a tent just to go car camping. And in that process, of course, I was, trying to read everything about it. And I found myself on YouTube looking at YouTube reviews for this tent. Naturally, the algorithm started suggesting all these outdoorsy videos from the original YouTuber, the Thru-Hiking YouTubers, Homemade Wanderlust, Darwin. Back then, there was a guy named Bigfoot that put out a bunch of stuff. And that naturally just kind of led me down that rabbit hole of thru-hiking. And I remember thinking, I think this is something I could get into. I had previously my only other experience with backpacking when I was a kid, in high school rather. My dad and my uncle had taken us on a section hike on the Appalachian Trail in Shenandoah National Park. Like so many first-time backpacking experience, we didn't really know what we were doing, but we did run into some thru-hikers back then and spoke with them. And it's something that really just kind of stuck with me the rest of my life. Always just kind of in the back of my brain. I can't really say that it was a lifelong goal, but it was something that always stuck with me. And, fast forward 2018, I'm looking at all these videos of these people doing it. And I just kind of thought, you know what? I think this is something that I could give a shot for. So from then on, I just kind of dove headfirst into researching anything and everything about the AT, from YouTube channels to books to, podcasts, anything I could get my hands on until I was ready to pull the trigger and take off. And that's what I did.
Wow. And Dave, from that moment where you kind of got the idea and started your research to actually like hitting the trail, how much of a gap was that? Was that less than a year or was that about a year?
Maybe about a half a year, I would say. So I went northbound in the spring. I left in late April. I think it was in the fall of when I started kind of looking at this stuff. And it was just really kind of a slow burn of, I was with a long-term relationship at the time. And it was kind of one of those things where I wasn't really ready to start telling her and people like, hey, I'm actually thinking about doing this. So it was just kind of a quiet thing I kept to myself, probably right around Thanksgiving. And then just kind of slowly over the next couple months made the decision. And then a couple months before I left, broke it to work and took it from there.
And I got to ask you, because you're kind of based in and around, and I feel like the Smokies are in your backyard. How is it, hiking in the Smokies, and what's it like compared to the West Coast trails that you've hit?
That's a good question. I would consider the Smokies to be quote unquote my home trail. If I take off locally, that's most of the time where I go. So I can be at the northern part of the park in 4 hours, less than 5 hours. It really is just like a second home to me. Before I had started on the PCT, all I had really known is East Coast hiking. And as much as I absolutely love the Smokies and the Southern Appalachian Mountains, when you compare it to hiking out west, they're really two different animals. People ask me about the AT compared to the PCT or hiking out west. And I always laugh and I tell them I'm grateful that I did the AT first because once you come out here, it's hard not to get spoiled by just the vastness of everything, the views alone, through the weather being a lot more cooperative at times out here. But yeah, I love the Smokies. I get down there as much as I can. I'd love to say that I'm a 900 miler of the Smokies on 900 miles of their backcountry trails. I'm still currently working on that, but yeah, I love it down there.
The thing that really caught our attention about your guys' love story is that it really evolved on these long trails. You guys met on the PCT. I believe you started dating on the Colorado Trail, and now you've hiked multiple through hikes since then. How did your guys' relationship evolve through those miles, and when did you realize the outdoors was something you genuinely loved sharing together?
Yeah, so with that, as you mentioned, we met on the PCT. The funny story is we actually started on the exact same day, but we didn't meet until the end of day 2, day 3, and we were leaving Lake Morena. It was a group of us that all kind of left around the same time, all just similar hiking styles, and it was a group of maybe 4 to 6 of us that kind of through the whole desert, we just were hiking together. We had the exact same kind of morning routine with when we wanted to leave, same, goals with mileage per day. So we just naturally fell hiking together. And then I know I mentioned this in the last episode, but from our trail family, a bunch of them decided, or I should say not a bunch of them, but majority of them decided to go through the Sierra, and it was a high snow year. And Dave and I were both in the boat of, I like the snow, but not enough to go through the Sierra and, the mountaineering that was involved with it. So the two of us actually flipped up from Kennedy Meadows South up to NorCal. And then it was fun because it was just us two hiking together through all of Northern California, which was great because it was just the two of us. So all that we really did was just talk, hike together, really get to know each other one-on-one. And then when we hit Southern Oregon, as you know, I live in Oregon, so that was my home base at the time. So when we were actually in Ashland, I made the decision that I wanted to hike a little bit faster so that in the town stops, I could slow down and connect with my area. And the whole intention was we were going to meet up again at some point down trail. I know I mentioned this in the last episode, but I kind of really vibed with hiking solo. I was always slightly ahead, but we just still stayed connected through, messaging and texting and keeping notes on trail. But also that kind of weird unknown feeling of like, are we going to cross paths again? Especially because we were very similar hikers. So we were kind of always the same distance apart. And then wildly enough, it was in Northern Washington. Was it at Stevens Pass? I did a side quest to the Enchantments to just do that as a day hike because you're so close. And I got back to Stevens Pass one night. What do you know who's there? Dave. And it was kind of one of those wild things where neither of us knew we were going to cross paths then. So at that point, we actually ended up, hiking the rest of the way through Washington and tagging Canada together, which kind of felt very full circle because it's hard to believe that you could start the trail with someone on the exact same date, hike so many miles together, go kind of your separate ways for a bit and then still reconnect and tag the border together. And as I said, it was really cool because all that we did do the entire PCT was get to know each other as friends. And then after the PCT, again, we just stayed in communication. I was obviously in Oregon, he was in Kentucky, and we just kept that friendship going. And then naturally after the PCT, you wait a few months and you're both really itching to get back out there. And we had kind of the same mindset of, at least one trail a year, whatever we can do. And it was funny. I actually remember with the CT, I kind of brought up like the idea of doing the CT, but wasn't at 100%. Dave kept kind of asking like, okay, well, let me know when you're at 100%. And, every few days or weeks, I'd be like, okay, I'm at 80%, then 90. Then at one point I was like, I'm at 99%. And the only 1% is just getting the okay from work. Yeah. And then we did the CT in 2024 and I'll let Dave take over from there.
So there's two different stories, I suppose. The entertaining one is how it came to be that we actually got together on the Colorado Trail. But like Melanie said, yeah, we were strictly friends through all of the PCT, all of our hiking together. We stayed in touch afterwards through text message. And unbeknownst to both of us, I think we were kind of in the same boat going into the Colorado Trail as far as how we felt about one another. And, I think we're both similar in the sense that somewhere in between the PCT and when we started the Colorado Trail is, at least for myself, when I started thinking, I think I might have feelings for this person, and both of us wondering, well, they're 2,000 miles away, wondering how that's going to go. I remember my friends at home, even from on the PCT, asking me, so, what's going on with this Melanie girl? What's going on between you two? And, I didn't have much to tell them other than I'm not really sure. I really don't know. I guess we're going to find out. And I remember them asking me, well, surely she's giving you some sort of indication. And I thought, no, not really, but I guess we're going to find out in Colorado. So we both went into the Colorado Trail with the same feelings, just, I guess, both kind of scared to do anything. So to set the stage and what it was like, here I am thinking, well, how is this going to come about? Knowing Melanie, she's not the most forward person in the world. So I knew that the onus was on me to break the ice somehow. But at the same time, we're unaware of what's going to happen. So I had prepared myself for what the possibilities were. And I thought, well, I don't want to bring this up too early and possibly ruin this great grand through hike through Colorado with this person. So the whole time I was stressing about when is the correct time to bring this up or how is this going to come about? So I think I decided halfway. I have to wait until halfway. Maybe something will happen before then. So halfway, came up. I was still kind of chickening out. And before I knew it, we were in Lake City, which is 3/4 of the way, maybe a little bit more than 3/4 of the way. Turns out I think we might only had 10 days left on trail. trail.
It wasn't much time.
And I remember thinking, well, I guess it's now or never. So the funniest part of this story is we were in Lake City. We were staying with a trail angel, and we went out for dinner to a place in Lake City, one of the only restaurants, called the Cannibal Grill, based on a local legend of a cannibal in the area. It's kind of funny. At dinner, it came up. I finally bit the bullet and mentioned it about, us being more than friends. Maybe to my surprise, maybe not. As soon as I mentioned it, Melanie got a very strange look on her face, a very awkward look on her face. Basically just gave me the, long distance, this, that, and the other. Long story short, I guess you could say it was a no. We went back to our hotel room that we were sharing that night. And as awkwardly as we could, we slept in the same bed until we made it out on trail that next day. So I had accepted my fate that this wasn't going to happen. And the next night on trail, we were both sitting in our separate tents, and it started raining, and I was going to ask her to just come into the tent so we can have dinner together. And I remember she just kind of had an attitude. She was just kind of crunchy about some things. And I remember thinking, well, maybe now it's not the right time. I know it's just a little bit of rain. I don't know what the deal is. And then turns out she had rethought what we talked about the night before and was ready to explain that she felt the same way. So long story short, the next night it came out at a campfire on trail that, yes, we both felt the same way about each other. So,
and going along with that, the rethinking it comes down to the thought process like anything, where I was single and I was very happy and content by myself. And it's like anything, whether it's, a relationship or a through hike or starting that business, where it can be so easy to be in like that safe area, that comfort zone. But also sometimes the best thing come from taking that leap, taking that jump. And it might mean that, sure, you set out and do something and fail, or go into a relationship and it doesn't end up how it's, gonna be, or you start that business and it doesn't work out. But at the end of the day, it could also mean that you take that little leap of faith and it ends up being like the best decision ever. Like I always think starting the PCT, I could have just stayed in my own, world and thought, no, I can't do that. But it ended up being one of the best decisions. And it was the same thing where I was like, I might be content by myself, but I also adore this man. And, it could be something that breaks my heart, or it could be the best decision ever. And so far, I have not looked back since then.
I love that, guys. And for listeners, you met on the PCT, and then was it a year later that you did the Colorado Trail?
Yeah, because we would have done the PCT. We both started at end of April and would have finished it up by September of 2023.
Early September, yeah.
Yeah, and then we did the Colorado Trail in August. So yeah, it was after the PCT. It was just, a lot of just, friendship, connection, stuff like that.
Do you guys remember the first long trail, or maybe it was a backpacking trip where you made the decision to share gear?
Well, yeah, that's actually interesting too. We had a week left in the Colorado Trail, and for that last 7-8 days, we crammed into my 2-person tent for that. And I remember we had talked so much about like, well, yeah, on our next backpacking trip, on our next trail, we'll be able to save so much weight. We'll be able to split gear and all that stuff. And then come to find out, we got on the Arizona Trail and we kind of looked at it and we were like, we don't really even have enough gear to split between us other than the tent. So
yeah, we're both pretty ultralight. So pretty much just share a tent, and otherwise we're pretty independent with our gear.
Yeah. Arizona Trail, we were a 110 couple.
Yeah.
And Dave, I did want to ask you about your PCT experience, because I'll share with Melanie a little bit later, but she really has planted the seed of catching sunrise at Mount Whitney in 2026 for me. And you guys mentioned it was the record snow year in the Sierras, and you had to flip up north, but then you got to finish on Whitney. Melanie's description of her experience on Mount Whitney and finishing up her PCT journey still gives me goosebumps. Can you share a little bit about your experience with the record snow year and then finishing on Whitney yourself?
I think Melanie's Mount Whitney story, finishing on Mount Whitney story, was much more romantic than mine. By the time my hiking buddy at the time, Australian fellow Zach, and I, we were just so done. We were just looking to get it finished. So we actually, our timing, we weren't able to do it for sunrise. It was special nonetheless to get up there and actually finish our hike up there. As far as in general, the PCT experience, It's interesting. If you would ask me the same question about the Appalachian Trail, I feel like I kind of had the opposite of experience between the two trails. If you ask me about the AT experience, I would undoubtedly tell you like sections of the trail, the Whites, the Southern Appalachian, Southern Maine. But looking back at the PCT, I think undoubtedly the most memorable parts of it weren't necessarily the trail as much as it was the people and the relationships that I made on the trail, which is different. Most people think of the Appalachian Trail as a more social one with, tramways and all that. But my experience on the PCT was from our crew that we had down in the desert section, Zinger, Mr. Rogers, shout out, Inspector, to this lady sitting right here. And again, my buddy Zach that I finished up with, those relationships, I actually walked away from the trail and continued those on and stayed in contact with those people. So those relationships are what the most memorable part of the PCT is for me. As far as the trail experience itself, I would undoubtedly say NorCal would probably be the standout for me with Melanie. We flipped up from Kennedy Meadows south thinking we're going to flip past all this snow in the Sierra. Screw that. We're going to hit to NorCal and we're just going to go walk north. When we got to Northern California, we realized the snow, there's just as much snow in Northern California as there was anywhere else. And so that stretch coming out of Chester, going through Lassen, going through Northern California was really the adventure of the PCT to me. It was truly a choose your own adventure, from route finding through massive snowfields and snow traverses and really dealing with the snow all the way up until probably Central Oregon.
Yeah.
But the Sierra was great. North Cascades were great. Those sections of the trails are always going to be special. But really what stands out to me is our adventure through Northern California.
And I got to ask you, because you did mention it, you're 2/3 of the way to the Triple Crown. Is the CDT drawing you? And how do you imagine tackling that trail potentially as a couple when the time comes?
Sure. Yeah, it certainly is calling me. I've always read before I did any long distance backpacking, as far as the 3 long trails go, the saying is you either do 1 or you do 3. Nobody does 2. And so that's always stuck in the back of my brain. And here I am sitting at 2. So if you look at it that way, I am obligated to do the CDT. So it is certainly on the agenda. As far as, we don't have anything concrete as far as plans of when that's going to happen, but it's definitely going to happen. Hopefully sooner than later. But I'll be honest, I know a little bit about the CDT, but I purposefully have kept myself from jumping too much into it just so I don't get too excited about actually making it a reality. So I know a little bit here and there, but as far as, what it's going to look like for us, we'll treat it just like any other trail, plan ahead of time and send it.
And then Melanie, last time you were on the podcast, we talked about your long trail progression, not just the PCT, but the CT and AZT. And boy, did you have not just a summer and a fall hiking season. How has your relationship with through hiking or long hike shifted or maybe deepened since the last time we spoke?
Yeah, so I would say overall with my experience with through hiking and backpacking, so much of it comes down to, I'll always say, the more that you experience, it expands your safety and comfort zone and you realize more of what you're capable of. So thinking back to when I first started the PCT, I had hiked a lot, but I remember thinking the longest day I'd ever hiked was a 20-mile day. And then throughout the PCT, it would jump up to upper 20s, 30s. And by the end of the PCT, thinking, a mid 30-mile day seems like nothing. And it's wild because now after the PCT, when we jump into other through hikes, it was wild because each through hike, it didn't seem crazy of being 600 miles, 800, 900 miles, because everything just seemed so much more relative. And same with even just planning backpacking trips over the summer, everything just seemed so much more within reach as you experience and do more. For example, over the summer, like I've mentioned that I like to trail run, and over the summer I did a 28-mile loop in Mount Jefferson. And I remember going into it thinking, well, I've never run 28 miles. But then, my brain was telling me, well, even if you can't run 28 miles, you've definitely hiked 28 miles in a day. So it's not that crazy. And I did it and I loved it and it didn't take that long. So after completing that, I was thinking, okay, well, now that's not that wild to say, send it on a 30, 35 mile trail run or whatever it might be. So it's cool. Just the more you experience, the more that you do and constantly kind of push that comfort and safety zone, the more everything everything comes into reach. So I feel like that's kind of like the biggest thing that's just shifted with my mindset of like, you are so much more capable of what you think you are. Just keep always pushing that comfort zone.
Yeah, you definitely were able to send it this summer, and both of you have tackled some big miles together. Not just the long hikes, but you most recently did the Wonderland Trail around Mount Rainier National Park, and even shorter trips like your Campsgiving adventure in Central Oregon and Umpqua. I'm interested in hearing from both of you, what's been the biggest shared challenge on the trail that ultimately made you a stronger team?
I think undoubtedly the biggest challenge we've suffered together or seen so far was on the Arizona Trail. Actually, I ended up with something very new for me. Early on in the first week, I ended up having some knee issues, which was totally new to me. I've never experienced that before, which over the next 2 weeks gradually just turned into a crippling IT band syndrome. So early on in the AZT, we both kind of had to take a step back and reassess what our capabilities were and how we were actually going to finish this trail. So, it essentially was was my challenge that ended up turning into both of our challenges. And in doing so, I think we learned a lot about each other.
Yeah, we definitely learned a lot about each other. It was, supporting one another with him just having the hard time physically with his knee and kind of for the first time facing, how are we going to do this? Because every other hiking experience we'd really had together, we just both felt great, felt amazing. There really was no hesitation or question in our abilities. And this was the first time that it was kind of like, okay, are we going to have to adjust? What is our plan B? And I think one of the big things for us was, again, me just having to support him, mentally and physically through it. Him trying to think also, I need to not hurt myself, but I also don't want to disappoint our big adventure together. But it was also kind of the realization that at the end of the day, we're in a long distance relationship. And no matter what the adventure is, whether it's doing the through hike or saying this trail isn't going to work, let's go on some other cool quest that is physically a possibility right then. The important thing is the time together and, whatever challenges you may face, saying, hey, we can either let it consume us or we can make the most of the situation at hand. And luckily, we were able to finish the AZT and ended up being a great time, even if there were some struggles. But, I think it was a really pivotal moment of learning to support each other in a new and different way.
Now, Melanie and Dave, one of your more recent adventures is the iconic Wonderland Trail around Mount Rainier National Park. It's a big one here in the Pacific Northwest, a bucket list for a lot of us. What stood out about that experience, whether it was a highlight, maybe a challenge, or maybe something surprised you about the mountain or maybe about each other?
I think we can both agree on probably one of our favorite days. It would have been day 2. And we did the spray alternate and it was just gorgeous. We started the climb early in the morning and then you just end up in this like beautiful, just high up meadow, flowers, beautiful views of Mount Rainier. And we pretty much, since we started it earlier, we had this whole area to ourselves and it ended up just being a beautiful day overall. And then we actually had a backcountry camping permit, which both of us kind of going into the Wonderland Trail were like, I don't really know what this entails, but the Wonderland Trail is pretty much, for anyone who hasn't done it, it's very regimented in the sense of you do have certain areas that you have to camp. There really isn't any wild camping. So you have your itinerary set kind of in stone and where you're going to be camping. It's a very permitted trail. So we had a backcountry permit, which meant we didn't have to camp in one of the campsites. And our friend who was a ranger there gave us some secret coordinates to a very particular place. And we, so we were like bushwhacking and getting up to these coordinate areas and ended up having this magical campsite. Mount Rainier was just right there. It was truly like one of the most beautiful sunsets we had ever experienced. And it was wild because on a trail that can feel, you're passing other people or you're in designated campsites. We really just felt like we had Mount Rainier and the Wonderland Trail to ourselves. It was truly just such a cool day from start to finish. So I would say that was one of our highlights.
Yeah, to piggyback on that, is somebody that doesn't live in the Pacific Northwest, I think it was really an eye-opener out there just how magical and beautiful Mount Rainier is. And Melanie says this all the time about the North Cascades, is why they're so special is that they have a magicalness, a character that some of the other big mountain ranges don't have. Nothing against Sierra Nevada, nothing against Colorado, but when you get into the North Cascades, particularly around Rainier, it really is, things are just truly magical. It is extremely difficult hiking, which is another standout, but for as difficult as it is infinitely as beautiful while you're there. So that was a standout to me of just how breathtaking the area is. Even as crowded as the Paradise area is, I got to say Paradise really, really wowed me. I mean, Paradise is the most fitting word I could think of to describe it, but truly breathtaking.
Regardless of how crowded it is, there's some moments that you can just have the trail to yourself, even if it's just brief, and it really does live up to its name. Now, another more recent adventure was you just wrapped up your Campsgiving trip through Central Oregon and Umpqua, and I gotta say, one of my favorite pictures that you posted, Melanie, recently was of a winter wonderland with Mount Hood in the background, which just looked amazing. Can you share a little bit about your Campsgiving trip, and what are some moments from that trip that felt especially meaningful or fun?
Yeah, so Dave obviously came out to Oregon for, this Thanksgiving November time. And it was really fun for me to plan a trip because anytime he's out this way, just like if I'm in Kentucky, you get to show the person your world. So we ended up going down to Central Oregon and doing the Mackenzie River Trail, or parts of it, I should say. I took him to Smith Rock. We drove down to Umpqua and did a bunch of the waterfalls on Highway 138. And it's just really fun for me personally to be able to show him certain areas that are very special to me, or I've gone to so many different times, and see him experience it for the first time. Like you just pointed out Mount Hood, we went to McNeil Point the other day, and it was that hike I've done so many times, and it's, I could do it with my eyes closed at this point, but he's never done it. So it was really just fun because by him doing it for the first time, it felt like I was almost doing it for the first time again. And honestly, after doing it with him, I'm like, wow, it's a reminder of how much I am a solo hiker, but how much more fun it is when I'm experiencing it with him. And yeah, we just literally had the most epic time in Mount Hood because the snow levels are crazy low right now, which is very weird for, late November, early December. But it was magical because we were climbing the whole climb up, or I shouldn't say the whole climb up, but like 3/4 of the climb up. It was just all foggy and through the clouds and like this crazy ice and snow buildup. And then we broke above the clouds to the most beautiful views, just being able to see the cloud inversion below us. And, again, we saw 2 people on trail. So it again felt like we had Mount Hood to ourselves. But yeah, as I said, I think my favorite moment from, Dave being out here for Thanksgiving and Campsgiving was just being able to show him so much of areas that are meaningful to me.
Yeah, something else I'd say, it was really nice to just get a break from backpacking, is that this was really kind of a road trip / car camping expedition, which allowed us to do some stuff that we would never normally do when we're backpacking. Certainly could bring us a whole lot more stuff. And that was neat to just not have the pressure of having to do miles during the day. As soon as you get to camp, do all that stuff. It was nice to not have the pressure to know, hey, we got to do big miles in the morning. It was nice to just breathe and say, hey, we're on our own time. We can come and go as we please. We can do and see what we want.
Making fires, s'mores, just
sure.
hanging out, especially with it getting dark at, 4:30.
That's crazy that you mentioned that, Melanie, because the picture, it looked like a bluebird day of Mount Hood, but I don't think, at least up here in Washington, we haven't had a good inversion day. So the start of the trail, you were just socked in, and how high did you have to get up in order to break through, do you think?
I want to say maybe 5,000 feet is when we finally broke through.
Yeah, elevation maybe that. It was, I know the whole climb is maybe a 3,000 foot climb. And I think it was after about 2,000 feet, we probably broke through. But it was kind of that weird feeling of like, we knew that it was clear, but there's that thought of like, are we going to break through? Did the cloud shift and we're not going to get above it? And then there was a certain point where you could start to see some sunlight peeking through. You could start to notice that some of the plants were like starting to not be as icy and defrost. And we actually got some of like the most epic sunlight kind of shots and whatnot. But yeah, it ended up just being unreal and magical.
Yeah, pictures probably don't do it justice, but man, they were some beautiful photographs that you were able to take. Now, I'm curious, guys, because you have so many miles on the trail together, for couples wanting to do their first overnight or backpacking trip together, what's the biggest mistake to avoid, and what advice would you give about staying connected and supported through those highs and lows on the trail?
I think the most obvious to me is, if you are looking to get out with your significant other, I think it's super important to realize you don't have to be connected at the hip the whole time. It's important to know that you do not have to take every step with your partner, and it goes a long way with maintaining a little bit of independence out there so that you both get to have your own experience and kind of have it together, but have your own separate experience. I think it's really important that couples don't think, hey, we have to be with each other, 100% of the day, because that is something that I think Melanie and I are really good at is, it's perfectly okay to say, hey, I'm going to put some headphones in and we'll meet up at this water source. Not that we're ever really extremely distant apart. We're usually within eyesight of each other, but it makes it a little different that you can have your own experience, they can have yours, you can share the overall experience together.
So yeah, that's like a lot of times we might be on trail and certain days we could spend, half the day literally just talking about anything and everything. And then certain days it's just, he's usually always hiking ahead and I'm always a little bit behind taking extra photos and whatnot. But again, we're always just within visual sight of each other. Or, sometimes when we come up to like a really cool spot, we're, making sure that we connect together. Or if we ever came across something dangerous, one another are waiting for each other. But yeah, very much what Dave said, like, no matter what, we're always going to have meeting spots throughout the day. But, we've been set certain mornings where it's just like all we do is talk. And then the afternoon, we're just gallivanting on our own and then, meeting up somewhere. Yeah. And I feel like that's what makes it so special. And it allows you to appreciate that time together. But as Dave said, you get that own independent experience and feeling, which I think is so important on any through hike or backpacking trip.
I think it's interesting too from a through hiking perspective, but can also translate it into a backpacking trip, longer or shorter. But before you go out, make sure you have some conversations and make sure you are on the same page about certain things like pace, mileage. What is the game plan if somebody gets hurt? I think a lot of trouble can be alleviated by having conversations like that to make sure that you're on the same page with what your expectations are when you're out there. I think goes a long way too.
Yeah.
Solid advice, guys. I wouldn't have thought of having that conversation beforehand. I feel like sometimes I see that conversation happening on trail, but level setting beforehand would probably be a huge plus for couples or even just people that are backpacking for the first time. So really solid advice. Now, Dave, one of our regular segments here on the podcast is we like to do a deep dive into our guest's Instagram feed and highlight a specific post or reel that really caught our attention. And for Melanie, it was her amazing sunrise adventure on Mount Whitney. And for you, Dave, I knew I had to ask you about this because when I lived in Phoenix, I was always on the hunt for Gila monsters and I could never come across them in the wild. And you were able to capture one. Can you share a little bit about that experience? Was that on the ACT and what was it like?
Where we were, it was on the Arizona Trail, so it was the day we were headed into Roosevelt Lake Marina. Unfortunately, it was in the middle of the trail. We saw it. By the time we got our cameras out to get it, I think it had crawled under a rock. It was probably the number one thing I wanted to see out in Arizona. For a silly reason, when I was a kid, I remember watching a movie with my dad called The Treasures of the Sierra Madre. It's an old Western. I remember being a little kid, and in one of the scenes there was an Gila monster, and I remember asking, what is that? and he told me it was an Gila monster, and I thought that's really cool. So going into the Arizona Trail, I had it in my brain that I really wanted to see one, but from what I hear, they can be pretty rare. We're grateful to see that, but that's something that I know Melanie are really passionate about out in the wild, is seeing the wildlife out there. And the funny part about that story was, headed into Roosevelt Lake Marina, my knee was absolutely killing, and it was just kind of a slog to get into town. And there's really nothing like an animal sighting that'll really just kind of pull you right out of that and change your mindset. And it's truly the most excited I get on trail. And I think probably Melanie too, is that when you do actually get to see some wildlife, it can turn you around 180 from your mindset and just how cool and special that is. So
yeah, definitely. I feel like every trail that we've been on, there's always been like a list of certain animals that we want to see. That's like one thing when we were doing the Colorado Trail, we had like a whole moose count going of just how many moose we were going to see throughout the whole trail, but kind of going along with, Dave making the comment of it kind of pulling you out of a slump or whatnot. I remember there was one day on the CT where I think we got a little bit far behind, and then we were trying to find a campsite, and we thought that there was one like half a mile away, and it ended up we walked like a few extra miles, and it ended up being that I don't remember if it was that day or that next morning.
It was in the morning.
It was in the morning. We saw like a bunch of moose, and it was kind of one of those weird things where, again, we're like, wow, if these, like little missteps and whatnot didn't happen, we wouldn't be surrounded by all these moose right now. So yeah, like he said, animals are just one of those things that will always add something really cool to the experience. And it's just like a fun little thing to have in the back of your brain of like, what can we, research ahead of time and then, check off throughout the way or keep our eyes peeled for.
Going back to the Gila monster, what's kind of funny is realizing how many people out there really have no idea what an Gila monster is. Because I got a lot of people asking me, what in the heck is that thing? And even when I told them, they still had no idea what it was. So
Yeah, I had a previous guest who was from the Phoenix area, and she kept saying like, oh yeah, every time I go to South Mountain, I spot at least one or two. And South Mountain was in my backyard. I kept an eye out for them. I like to say that maybe it's my bad color blindness where maybe I do see them, but they just blend into the landscape where I can't see them like others. But yeah, I got to agree with you guys. Being able to see wildlife, especially when it's unexpected, can just really be an uplifting moment out on the trails. So I'm glad you guys were able to not just see the Gila monster on the AZT, but then seeing all the moose. That's incredible. Well, that was it for the regular questions, guys. These last couple questions are questions that we like to ask all our guests. I'm interested, Melanie, if maybe some of these have changed since the last time we spoke. And then for Dave, these are going to be brand new for you. But I feel like for hikers and backpackers, sometimes they have a regular routine, whether it's at the summit, at camp, at the end of the hike. For a lot of us, it's packing that favorite snack or drink. For others, it's enjoying a moment of zen. And then for a lot of us, it's also that favorite meal afterwards. Is there a regular custom or routine that you like to do when you reach your destination or maybe when you make it back out?
As far as summit routines, I'm not sure we have a set summit routine other than most of our summit time is spent trying to decide how we're going to take our summit photo and what that's going to look like other than, snack time and stuff like that. As far as getting back to the destination, I'm a hamburger and a beer sort of guy all the way. I can confidently say I've had a burger in every single trail town that I've been to in all of my through hikes. But
yeah. Then otherwise with me, I am still very strong on my protein coffee. Y'all know, whether it's starting my day, midday, any excuse for a break. Otherwise, we were talking about like at night, we kind of have our normal like chore routines. When we get to camp, we'll have dinner together. And then by the time that we're like finally going to start laying down, we'll usually kind of look at far out or, whatever map we're using and plan out our day the following day. And then personally, I'll always start editing photos and journaling and then, be showing him certain random photos while he's trying to fall asleep. But I think that's pretty much for the most part. We're very different in town he likes to go out and eat and I want to find all my fruits and veggies and protein.
Well, I gotta give you props, Melanie, because since speaking with you, I've done the protein coffee, and I slowly started by just asking for a black Americano and then adding my protein to it. But now one of the coffee shops I go to, you can take your own cup. So then I just do the scoop in there and then give it to them, and then they give me an Americano with it, and game changer for sure.
Well, I'm glad you started the protein coffee game.
And then I got to ask you, Dave, just because I feel like the burger and beer is so quintessential when it comes to town days or even end of the hike days. Is there a burger place that stands out at any of the towns that you've been to where you're like, that's a good one. That's one that I'd go back?
We were actually talking about this earlier because we made a trip into the Columbia River Gorge today, and I had mentioned if we happen to go through Cascade Locks, going back to the little, I'm not even sure what the name of it is. It's a little dairy crest there right on the side of the road. Anybody that's been through Cascade Locks or done the PCT knows what I'm talking about. But I think it's a toss-up between that place. And we were also saying there's, again, I don't know the name of it, but in Big Bear, California, in Southern California, there was a bar that does a PCT burger, which is not unheard of for most trail towns on the PCT. But for whatever reason, their burger really hit the spot. It was essentially a bacon cheeseburger, avocado, onion, mushroom, you name it, it was on there. I think it was a half a pound burger. Those two stand out for sure. But again, I'm a burger and a beer guy. It's pretty hard to mess up a burger for me. So
now, this next one is about your pack list. And Melanie, same thing. I'm wondering if it's changed over the last couple months. And then Dave, for you, which item sticks out. But is there a luxury item that you tend to pack that falls outside of the essentials? And not necessarily like luxury cost-wise, but more that it brings you comfort and joy, but isn't necessarily required on the trails.
Yeah, so one of the ones for me that I thought about last time after we talked was definitely power banks. I probably carry more like power bank energy, whatever you want to call it, that I need. And that's just for the sense of if you follow me on Instagram, you can probably see that I thoroughly enjoy, taking so many photos. So I just like to make sure that I can thoroughly charge my phone just so I can continue to take a lot of photos. So I probably always have, if you're with me and your phone dies, I might be able to help you out there.
I would agree as far as battery power. That would definitely be, I carry more than I need to. But at the moment, I can't really think of many luxury items that I have, but I have carried some. I can tell you some of them that I have carried. On any of my long through hikes, I've always carried a brush for when your beard inevitably gets too big. It's something nice to have. Other than that, let's see, on the Arizona Trail, I carried 2 pillows, one for my head, one for in between my knees, which was really nice. That's definitely not essential. And then on the AT, I did carry town clothes too. So I carried a cotton shirt and a totally separate pair of hiking shorts that I only wore in town and kept clean, which I can't say I would do that again, but I did enjoy them on the AT.
Love that. And then I got to ask, because I'm struggling with the power bank. So I originally started with the Anchor power bank that was, I think, 20,000 milliamps, but it was super heavy. So then I switched to the Nightcore 20,000 milliamp one. And I feel like it is extremely lightweight. I think it weighs only a third of what my Anchor does, but I feel like it doesn't last as long. Is there a specific brand or type of power bank that you're using?
Well, it's funny that you ask, because up until my last one crapped out on me, I was a Nightcore guy myself. So I've had 2 of the 20,000 milliamp ones, the new super lightweight ones. The first one I left in the back of a pickup truck in Leadville that I couldn't get back. So I bought another one, and sad to say that one, the charging port on it, something broke in it. So I actually didn't even get to use it for its full life. In my search for something a little bit cheaper, I came across a Reddit post that was on, I think it was on the ultralight subreddit, talking about a Haribo gummy bear power bank. As bizarre as that sounds, I kind of laughed, so I put it in Amazon. And sure enough, Haribo, the gummy bear people, they, up until recently, made a power bank. They made 10,000 and 20,000 milliamp ones. I'm trying to think what I paid for it. I think I paid like $15 for the 20,000, and it was the same weight as the Nightcore one, with a built-in charger and a little cute little gummy bear on the charging cord. But so that's what I'm using right now, and so far so good. It's doing great. Yeah. Sorry, Nightcore, but yeah, the gummy bear people beat you out.
Yeah, and then personally, I also don't know the brand name of mine, but it's pretty comparable in weight to Nightcore. But if you search it on Amazon, it's the one where the part that shows what the power supply is, it's a paw print. And I remember seeing it and it was like, reminded me of dogs. And then looking into like, the info about it, I was like, wow, this is pretty dang light for the battery that you're getting out of it. And honestly, I've used them for PCT, CT, AZT, every other backpacking trip, and they're still going strong and are very lightweight. So look power banks on Amazon, and if you see the paw print, that is the go-to.
Oh, I am so going to be checking out both of those after we're done recording, because the gummy bear one, just curious to see what it looks like, but the paw print, that's a cool way to do it. Now, guys, we're recording this at the end of 2025. 2026 is right around the corner. Is there any exciting hiking or travel goals that you have for the new year, or anything exciting on the horizon that we should look out for?
So right now, we do not have anything set in stone for 2026, but as we both mentioned, our goal is to do as many through hikes as we can, and we both have the goal of at least one a year. So we're kind of at that point where every year we're going to probably sit down and figure out what is our next through hike going to be? Where are we going to venture next?
Again, like I said, we don't have anything on the books as far as this spring, but again, that could change tomorrow if we decide we're going to go ahead and send it on something. Luckily, at this point, we've got our planning skills dialed in, and who knows, that could change tomorrow. So
all it takes is both of us saying 100%.
Stay tuned. Yeah.
Oh, well, I can't wait to see what 2026 brings for both of you. This next section of the podcast is the this or that questions, and it's one of my favorite sections to do with couples, as well as with the parents or just hiking buddies, because I feel like each time we do it, there are some surprising responses. I'm going to give you 2 hiking related topics, and you just choose which one you prefer out of the 2. Melanie, we did update it for season 13, so there's a couple new ones on here. Feel free to elaborate, and you're more than welcome to choose both or neither. But the first one is, if you had a choice, would you prefer ascending or descending?
Oh, ascending for sure.
Yeah, ascending.
And then I feel like sometimes, especially here in the Pacific Northwest, this could be a tough one, but waterfalls or summits?
I'm a summit girly all the way.
Summits, agreed.
And then in order to reach those summits, if you had a choice, say there's 2 trails at the trailhead, one had switchbacks, one went straight up, which one would you go with?
That's a tough question. I guess it would depend on how long of a straight up hill it would be. So if it was anything less than a mile or 2, I'd say just straight up. Let's just get it over with. If you're talking a 5, 10 plus mile long one, give me the switchbacks.
Yeah,
for sure.
Yeah, we're in the same boat. Sometimes it's going for a while, do it switchbacks, but like when we were in Colorado and you can see that 14er summit, well, sort of maybe see it, maybe it's the full summit.
Right.
I'd rather just send it straight up.
And then our most controversial one, trek poles or freehand?
I am 1,000% on team trekking pole. I don't understand how anybody can not use trekking poles. I really just don't get it.
Yes, I am. The only time you'll really ever see me with trekking poles is if I'm through hiking. And then when I'm backpacking, I'll either be no trekking poles or just one. But yeah, unless I'm through hiking, that's the only time you'll really see me with poles. I guess now with my tent, I have to have at least one. But yeah, otherwise I love free hands.
And then this next one's about your footwear. And I feel like when it comes to through hikers, they're typically team one of these. But when it comes to your through hikes or even day hikes, when it comes to your footwear, are you rocking trail runners or traditional hiking boots?
Trail runners all day. Yep. I don't own a pair of boots. But
yeah, we are both big trail runners.
Nothing a pair of trail runners and waterproof socks can't fix if it's slushy.
Yes.
And then this next one's about trail systems. If you had to choose between these 2 types, would you go a loop trail or an out and back trail?
For me, loop trail, definitely.
Yeah,
as silly as it sounds, I need that feeling of accomplishment that you went from point A to point B and not just out and turned around and came back.
I just love a loop because who doesn't love a loop?
And then this one might be one of the tougher ones, but if you had to choose, would you choose a sunset hike or a sunrise hike?
That is a tough one. For me, I think it would be a toss-up. I would lean closer to sunrise than sunset, only because I think to make a really good sunrise or sunset, I think it's all about the cloud cover that's out there. You need a little bit of clouds to give it some sort of, texture, and I think that's more likely in the sunrise. So I'm going to say sunrise.
Yeah, it's hard for me to choose between sunset and sunrise because the thing is, I would go probably sunrise as well, and I'm going to say it just because I am much more of an early bird. But at the end of the day, I've also had so many magical sunsets, especially this past summer. The sunsets honestly probably trumped the sunrises, but I'm going to go sunrise.
And then I'm interested in hearing the response to this one, because I feel like the Pacific Northwest is known for its spring wildflowers, and then the Southeast, as well as the Northeast, are known for their fall colors. But if you had to choose, would you choose spring wildflowers or fall colors?
I would go with spring flowers.
Yeah, I would definitely go spring flowers, just like I love summer wildflowers. Any flowers are just my favorite. And I was even telling him earlier, I can't wait at some point for him to be out here in the spring just to see how magical it is in the gorge. It's just, there's nothing like it.
No, yeah, and you were able to share some amazing pictures from this spring and summer wildflower season in the gorge. And I think for me, at least personally, it was one for the record books. They just lasted way longer.
Yeah, even just the summer flowers were unreal, like especially in Mount Hood or Rainier, it was better than I've ever seen.
And then guys, this one's a new one for this season. When it comes to your water carrying system, do you guys use water bottles or a water bladder?
Water bottles all day.
We're bottle people.
Yeah.
And we actually both just got the new like CNOC Thru bottles. So it's like essentially a smart water bottle, but
little more durable.
Yeah, more durable.
Still plastic.
And
but,
reusable.
Yeah, less disposable plastic.
Yeah.
But they're nice. I highly recommend them.
Yeah.
They're very nice.
Yeah, we love our bottles.
Nice. Yeah, I'm curious about those because they just came out recently, right? I think one thing that I love about them is it actually has a tether on the cap.
Yes, it does have a tether to the cap, yes. And they do still fit the normal sport caps too, so yeah.
And then the last one, guys, is if you had to choose when you're at a summit to do a summit beer or maybe just a drink or a summit snack, which one would you go with?
Beer for sure.
I'm going to just send it on some protein coffee. I don't care what time of day.
Well, that was it, guys, for the this or that questions. It has been an awesome time speaking with you both, and I'm so thankful that you were able to come on the podcast and share about your individual journeys as well as your journeys together. If folks want to follow your upcoming adventures on social media or online, where are some of the places they can find you guys at?
Yeah, we're both on Instagram. My Instagram handle is Dave's Not Here. It's a little complicated. It's Dave's __ not _ here.
And I am mel.inthewild on Instagram.
And we'll be sure to put both of those in the episode show notes so people can follow along. Dave, Melanie, thank you so much for coming on the podcast. Looking forward to what 2026 has to offer for you. And I wish you the best year to come.
Thank you, Ivan. Appreciate it.
Yes, thank you. And it was so nice catching up again.
And that brings us to the end of this episode alongside Melanie and Dave. We extend a heartfelt thanks to them for joining us on the podcast. Be sure to follow them on Instagram. Catch Melanie at mel.inthewild and Dave at Dave's Not Here with underscores separating each word. And for more, be sure to check out the episode show notes. This episode of Hikes and Mics was produced by Jordan Smith. Be sure to follow her adventures on Instagram at jordan.journeys. New episodes will drop every Monday throughout the winter hiking season, with the occasional Friday bonus episodes along the way. To make sure you never miss out a moment of these inspiring trail stories, hit that follow or subscribe button. Your support truly keeps the community going through every season. Don't forget to connect with us on Instagram at Hikes and Mics. That's where you'll find behind-the-scenes episode visuals, my own winter hiking adventures, and plenty more to keep the cold weather stoke alive. As we wrap up today's journey, remember, even when the trails are quiet and the mountains are blanketed in snow, the spirit of adventure is still very much alive. So tread those happy trails, stay warm out there, and keep exploring. Until next time, my fellow hikers, happy hiking. This episode's music was created by Ketsa. Follow along with him on Instagram at Ketsa Music. This episode is brought to you by Ursa Minor Outfitters. Folks, I'm absolutely in love with my loon mug. It's handmade, it's an absolute piece of art. Whether it's at the office or at the house, people keep asking to check it out. If you're not a loon fan, they also have other beautiful mugs for wildlife fans of moose, bears, and eagles. They specialize in products highlighting the outdoors and local pride through quality design by local artists. They've even started expanding into items beyond mugs, like apparel, dog accessories, and soon candles and more. They also try to partner and highlight other small businesses, and in some cases, forego profits in lieu of charitable giving to help their community, such as the dog rescue. So check them out, ursaminooroutfitters.com, and enter promo code HikesMikes10 at checkout to receive 10% off your order. And for our four-legged hiking partners, they also have a portable silicone dog bowl and also a sweet over-the-collar dog bandana. Go check them out, ursaminooroutfitters.com, and don't forget to enter promo code HikesMikes10 at checkout to receive 10% off your order.